Hey, mamas, welcome back to another awesome episode of the Mama Work It podcast. I am so glad you're here. If you are new to the show, Mama Work It is all about supporting women in the juggle of mom life, work life, wife life, fill in the blank life. And I am your host, Marissa Lonick, working mama of 4 kiddos. So excited this week. Our guest is my friend and amazing mama. Her name is Ilana Yahdav. She is a certified motherhood coach, grief educator, speaker, writer, and the CEO of the Non-Linear Journey. She's a mom of 2 young kids and combines her expertise and experience to guide moms through motherhood's physical and emotional transformations, from embracing their new identity to grieving the life they've left behind. With gentle humor and deep empathy, Ilana makes challenging topics approachable by creating a safe and supportive environment. I know this conversation is going to be so impactful and so good. Ilana, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. So excited to be here with you.
Yes. Well, first and foremost, I'd love it if you could just tell our listeners a little bit more about you, your journey in motherhood as a grief educator and now a motherhood coach.
Yeah, it's been a pretty nonlinear journey for me, like it is for all of us. Um, becoming a mom like just rocked my world. In the height of COVID, having my first child during lockdown. I had nothing to compare it to, but there was just so much fear around the unknown, and then bringing a preemie newborn in the NICU. So it was quite my motherhood journey was quite intense to start. But before I became a mom, I was a certified grief educator and grief counselor and helping people through grief and loss. And that's really been my passion. And when I became a mom and realized how much of my life that I was grieving, I realized, wait a second, there's a missing piece there, both for myself as a mom and for myself as a coach and a counselor. And then I learned about matrescence, which I will share in a second, but it absolutely changed my life. And it was that missing piece. So there were 2 moments in my personal and professional life that were really pivotal. One, when I learned about grief recovery and support, and the other when I learned about matrescence. And of course, what do I do when I learned about something that resonated? I immediately research and then have to become certified from the experts because that's just the way I go. And so just the combination of grief and matrescence has really been that missing piece for me. And I get to bring it to all the mamas that I get to support. And it's just an honor and a privilege because while I get to help other mamas heal, I also help myself heal as well. So it's really win-win there.
So beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And you're helping others, you're healing yourself at the same time. So, Ilana, for our listeners who are just hearing this word for the first time, matrescence, tell us what it is, why it's important, why all moms out there need to know about it.
Yes. Matrescence. When I first heard it, I was like, how do you spell it? How do you pronounce it? In fact, fun fact, Google spell check still does not recognize it, but it was added to the dictionary a few years ago. So that's pretty cool. So matrescence is the complete transformation and identity shift that we go through as mothers. So it's our psychological, our social, our emotional, physical, economic, cultural, spiritual, everything. All of the changes that we go through when we become moms. And when you hear matrescence, you can liken it to adolescence. Think about, when teenagers are becoming adults. They question their identity. They question everything. Their bodies are changing. Hello, pimple faces. Every single thing is changing about their bodies. It's the same in matrescence. And apparently, like, adolescence is a fairly new term, a couple hundred years old. And before that, there wasn't a term for that. So think about if we didn't have that term adolescence and we look at teenagers being absolutely, you know, bonkers, we can think that they're being bonkers, but they're not. It's all developmentally appropriate. So we can liken that to matrescence, which matrescence is, it's all developmentally appropriate. Our bodies are changing. Our brains are changing. every aspect, our relationships, the way we relate to the world, to self, it's all changing. And so by having a term for that, to me, when I learned that, it was so empowering because so often it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I should know how to be a mom. You give birth to a baby and they're like, here, take this crying, pooping thing home and take care of it. And you're like, I don't know what you do with this, and then I'm sure other moms can relate, there's that guilt of like, oh gosh, like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I need to figure out what I'm doing and I need to do it with a smile on my face and enjoy every second. And that's not true. We're not supposed to know what we're doing. I mean, how could we? We've never been moms before, And so learning about matrescence and that there really is a term and that we're learning alongside our babies. Our babies are learning how to baby. We're learning how to mommy. And it's just very liberating to have a term for that and to come back in moments of, my inner mom critic gets pretty loud sometimes. And um sometimes to really tame her, I have to remind her that we're also learning. And when you become a parent for a second time, you're learning how to parent too. And in your case, a third and a fourth. And with every single milestone, every single change, you're learning. Matrescence doesn't ever end. Matrescence keeps going. And so I felt like I want every mama to know about that because we have adolescents, they're teenagers. We have matrescence. We're becoming moms. And so it really just touched me to my core. And then when we look at matrescence, and so much of motherhood is grief. So let's just define grief for a second here. Grief is the normal and natural reaction to a loss of any kind. And it's the conflicting feelings around the end or change of any familiar pattern of behavior. Now, I'm trained in the grief recovery method of the Grief Recovery Institute, and that's the definition that they use that I have also adopted. And so when you think about changing in any patterns of behavior, is that not motherhood? Like every pattern has changed. Every single thing in our life has changed. Because oftentimes when people hear grief, they're like, oh, no, no. I don't want to think about grief and motherhood in the same sentence. But grief isn't just death. Grief is so much more. And in motherhood, we are grieving. We're grieving who we were. And that's okay because we can love our tiny humans so much and grieve. It doesn't make us a bad mom at all. And so that's something that I also feel is very passionate to remind mamas is that we can feel those dueling emotions and they don't take away from each other. There's plenty of room to beat ourselves up and to celebrate ourselves. There's plenty of room to miss who we were and to love that woman who we're becoming, to just want 5 minutes to go to the bathroom by yourself and then spend those 5 minutes looking at a picture of your kid because you miss them already. I think it's just so important for us to also have some ways to identify what we're going through. One of my mentors would always say that, words create worlds. Dr. Aurelie Athen would say that. And she mentored my mentor, Amy Taylor Kabaz, who just changed my life and taught me everything about matrescence. But when we have words, we're able to heal because words create so much power. Words can destroy. Yes, I'm not saying that because they 100% can. But words also have the power to heal. So to be able to name grief, to name what we're going through in motherhood, and we do grieve, like we still will have loved ones die and we will have to grieve that and still be a parent. But there's so much beautiful grief in motherhood. And so to be able to identify that and name that and see that, it's really, really empowering and healing. And so that's my mission, to make sure I want everyone to know about matrescence and everyone to understand the grief in our motherhood journey and that it's okay.
Yes.
It's real.
Yeah. Oh, so many good things you said. First thing that really captivated me was that almost as if this matrescence and this grief are like, they coexist and like they almost for most people, I think, are both present. And you're right. Like it's almost like that expression I'm thinking of is like, you can be grateful for what you have while working for what you don't. Like if you're a goal getter, you can still be in gratitude in the moment you're in, but you could still be hustling for things that you still want in life. Right. And so it's kind of like you can still grieve that past version of you but be so incredibly grateful for, like you said, the woman you're becoming or the mom you're stepping into. The other thing I love too is that giving this a name and really identifying and learning more about it, this matrescence, I think for many women, it makes us feel a little less crazy during this very crazy season and a little more in community, because I think a lot of women tend to feel isolated during postpartum or even just during different seasons of motherhood. And being feeling isolated and feeling alone during those times definitely is not helpful in trying to heal yourself in that process. And so even just like having this, like, I don't know if it's a clinical term or what, but having this terminology and this diagnosis almost really makes this feel like, okay, this is a widespread issue. This is a feeling I'm not only feeling, just no one's really talking about it, maybe, and puts it out there as this topic of discussion or this like commonality that we can connect with others in.
Yeah, and it's one of the hardest things with motherhood, like you talked about, is that feeling of isolation and loneliness. And what happens when we feel isolated and lonely? Our brains we can start to ruminate and we can fixate on things and we can think we're the only one. And we can start to kind of turn inward where we're not meant to mom in isolation. We're not meant to do this alone. And when we all, turn inward, then we're not able to open ourselves up to be supported and to support others. And so by knowing that everything we're going through is normal, some of us carry it differently. That's okay. It's our journey, but that it's normal. All of these feelings are normal. Like I just can't stress that enough, because I know I have this conversation with myself probably multiple times a day of like, of course it's hard. Like, who said motherhood is easy? Who said raising these tiny humans who scream and yell and don't want what they beg for and then get mad at you when you give it to them? These little temperamental cutie pie petri dishes that get you sick all the time. Of course it's hard. And of course you experience this love there's no description for. Like, there's just no way to describe that love that's there, that keeps growing. And that rage that can bubble up, that anger, that, oh my goodness, I just need 2 minutes to myself. I'll take 1 minute. That would be great. And we can beat ourselves up for all of these feelings instead of realizing that they all get a seat at the table. They all have a seat at the table. Because the more we push it away, the harder it is. Like, think about, like, when you hold sand, when you hold it, grasp it tightly, it leaks out. But when we just let it sit there, we can hold it. It's the same with our emotions. When we start to like stifle them, that like, I'm the only one experiencing this. I must be a terrible mother. I'm not doing this right. We get graspy instead of being like, okay, this was a hard moment, repair and give ourselves grace and love. And then we keep going. But again, those juxtaposing emotions, you can feel lonely. It is lonely. Motherhood is very lonely, even with a village too. It's less lonely, but it's hard. Those
Mm-hmm.
3 a.m. wake ups to a screaming toddler who just wants to watch Blippi. That was my 3 a.m. this morning. It's hard. It's hard, and I think all of us mamas, can give ourselves that gift of grace of, we're learning with our kids. We're learning too. There's no
Right.
manual of what to do when your 3-year-old wakes up screaming for Blippi. Maybe there is. I'd like it.
Yeah. I mean, we've all heard the expression change is hard. And
Yeah.
so when we apply this to matrescence, which, like you're saying, is a season of change, of development, of learning, it just makes perfect sense that it would be hard. It would feel hard in that season.
Yeah, and there's so many parallels to grief, to the grief journey, which is why to me they're so interchanged. Because when we're grieving, say we're grieving a loss, a death of a loved one, can also feel really lonely, can feel really isolated, can feel like I don't know how to live, because that's also a transformation. Just the way matrescence changes us in every single way. And in a lot of ways, grief can help people become more empathetic, more loving, have deeper connections. It can also go the other way. And so by understanding what these are, it really does, like, understanding these words, it can also help us, deepen that compassionate curiosity of what's coming up for me and why. How can I lovingly, like, say to myself, okay, yes, you just screamed at the kid. Okay, how can you forgive yourself and then go repair with the kid? Because let's face it, like, I don't think anyone could say they've never raised their voice at their kid. And if you did, kudos to you. Um, and that's okay. It's part of life, right? It's all part of life. It's part of our matrescence journey.
Yeah. Yes. So well said. One of my favorite quotes around grief is grief allows growth.
Mm,
And I think if you can remind yourself of that when you're really feeling low in the grief process, is that this is happening for me, this is growing me in some way, shape, or form. It's sort of like you can see just a glimmer of hope, like the silver lining you need just to kind of get through that day or that moment, you know?
yeah, exactly. And another parallel, you know, Amy Taylor Kabaz, my mentor, just talks about that inner split when you become a mom, because you're no longer that person who you were before, and you never will be. So with grief, there's also that you're no longer that person you were before, and you are transforming. And what that transformation looks like is dependent on you, dependent on the support you have, the environment that you have, because you're no longer and you never ever will be who you were. You will never ever be Marissa pre-children. So we get to grieve that, and we get to celebrate your transformation into an incredible mama of four. We get to celebrate our transformation into the new woman that we are. Like my husband will say, "You're Ilana 2.0." You know, like we're a newer version of ourselves, and we get to, like, like, break all these limiting beliefs, and we get to question who we were before and decide who we want to be now, new values, new priorities. So it's a little daunting, but it's also really cool. And the same with grief. Like, grief will, like, just shatter open everything. I, like, break down, break through. Grief just shatters that open and has a transformation, and it breaks down old things that might have been important are no longer important. The same with motherhood. Things that used to be important, maybe not so important anymore. And that's okay, because it's a new version of yourself. Hence the grief, who you were before, love who you are before, and then you get to love and enjoy who you're becoming now and transforming into now.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Alana, do you have any like parting words of wisdom as an experienced mom, entrepreneur, specialist in this area for those listening? Like, if someone's really just gravitating toward this concept of matrescence and like really understanding that, oh, maybe I'm grieving this past version of myself, like your words are really speaking to them. What would you say as far as like words of advice or a tangible action they can take after the show, or just anything you want to kind of leave them with before we wrap up and hit our lightning round?
Your feelings are all valid, no matter how big, how small, if they seem ridiculous to you, they are all valid. So I want to leave the words I want to say is they're valid, and please don't, um, please don't, um, just take that away from yourself. Anything that you feel is okay. Anything that feels hard, it is hard. And to just have that compassion towards yourself, that what you're feeling is valid, and that matrescence is this wild, nonlinear journey that we're all going through. And so please don't discount any feelings that you have. So really, if you just need to write that, like, my feelings are valid. In fact, I'm writing a whole workbook on that, just because of this very, like, conversation of how important it is for us to remember that Our feelings are valid and it's real. And if it has an emotional charge for you, it is 100% valid what's coming up for you, and that this is hard and that it's okay that it's hard. And so please just remind yourself that, when in hard moments where everything feels hard, it is hard, and if you can just take just a deep breath. Usually we can do that in 1 second, just take a deep breath. I sometimes try to smile when everyone's screaming, and it's actually very effective, but just remember, like, my feelings are valid. My feelings are valid. And matrescence looks different on everyone. And even if you can't spell it or pronounce it, it doesn't matter. You can say the M word. Like, it is valid. It is describing that whole transformation and experience of what you're going through. So valid. Write that down on a Post-it anywhere. It's just a great place to start for all moms.
Yes.
And all people,
Yes.
actually, everyone. Your feelings are valid. But since we're talking in the context of moms here.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Everyone's feelings are valid, but if you are a mom listening, especially dealing with matrescence, extra valid.
Yeah, and it sounds so obvious, but it's not, right? Like it sounds like something we would say to our kids, like, your feelings are valid. And I hope we say that to our kids. But really, as moms, we need to remember our feelings are valid.
Well, isn't it like that? It's like that concept of like we tell others all the time things like you're doing great or you're so good at that. And then like the second someone like if anyone ever says to me like, wow, you're such a good mom, like it hits me so hard. Like I almost sometimes get like emotional when someone tells me that or notices that and says it to me. Because even though like deep down we know we're doing our best, we're doing a good job, someone else reminding us of that and noticing that is so empowering. It feels so good.
Yeah. Because so much of what we do is so, invisible. And sometimes it just feels like we're just doing and doing and giving everything that we can, and that it's just never enough. So, yeah.
Yeah.
On
Yeah.
that note, my little 2-year-old randomly said, "I love you" the other day. And I mean, it sounded more, I don't even know, but she had the intonations. And I just did tear up. It was just it just really like felt so good to my mama heart to hear that,
Hmm.
I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
thank
So
you.
good. I know. It's so good to pause during those moments and like just really like breathe them in and appreciate them for sure.
Yes, it's so hard to do.
Yeah. All right, Ilana, on that note, we are going to switch things up. This part of the show is where we move into the lightning round and we ask you some random, fun, kind of personal questions so our listeners can get to know you. Are you ready?
Yes,
All right.
I think.
What if you could only eat one food for the rest of your life? What would it be? Calories don't count.
I love eggplant parmesan. It would probably be eggplant parmesan.
Yeah. Okay. What's your cocktail
Yeah.
of choice?
Well, I actually I used to be apple martinis were my favorite, but becoming a mom, I like look at alcohol and I can't hold it. But Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand is my go-to. It has to be
Mm-hmm.
from New Zealand.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah. What book are you reading right now?
Actually, reading like 3, but a book I'm reading, a speaker I heard at a women's conference, it's called Micro Joy, and it's not necessarily about motherhood or grief, but of course I have to bring motherhood into everything, and it's actually ties into what we're just talking about of, like, enjoying the little moments, like the micro joys. I just love that term so much, like, the micro joys in motherhood, and so I'm only halfway
Yes.
through it, but so far it's pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah, I love that. Like that example you shared is such a micro joy moment, right? Yeah.
Yes.
What's one app you just can't live without?
Probably my calendar app so that I can see my husband's schedule, my kid's schedule, my schedule.
Yeah, same, totally.
Yeah.
And finally, what's something most people may not know about you?
That I mm, that I lived in China for 5 years and speak Mandarin and just traveled all over Southeast Asia, and I'm just so in love with Mandarin and Chinese culture. And my daughter's starting Mandarin immersion school next year, and a lot of people who don't know that I lived in China are like, "Well, that's cool that you're so excited," but I'm just so excited that she will not sound like a foreigner. I have a terrible accent. But yeah, that China is just one of my happy places.
Yeah, I did
So
not know that. That's awesome.
yeah, it was an incredible experience. I'm dying to take my kids, my husband back.
Sounds like it. Yeah. All right,
Eh,
Ilana, well, please tell our listeners where they can learn more about you and what you do and connect with you after the show.
Yeah, I'm on all social media platforms, but my website is thenonlinearjourney.com. So that's a good place to start. And actually all my social media handles are the nonlinear journey. Instagram is the nonlinear journey life. Yeah, so if you come to my website, send me an email. I'd love to connect, chat everything, motherhood, grief, China, anything. And I share, resources, more stuff on matrescence if you want to go deeper in that in my blog. And just, yeah, love to just talk because that's how we all heal. We use our words to heal.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ilana, for being such a powerful, impactful guest and bringing this topic to the Mama Work It community. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And I really, really hope that all of your listeners are able to just gain some, be able to have that self compassion and reminder of validity of all of your feelings.